It's the 85th Annual Academy Awards, and the Oscars were coming off a fairly stable year. The Artist was the big winner that night, a silent movie about the transition from silent films to sound films. It was a winner most could agree was likable, even if in hindsight, Hugo or The Tree of Life would have made for more daring winners. Otherwise, though, there wasn't much to complain about. Billy Crystal was a serviceable host, none of the winners could be considered truly terrible, and Best Animated Feature went to a movie that surprised a lot of people for how mature and enjoyable it was for being from a studio that is primarily known for SpongeBob SquarePants these days. Since everything was smooth sailing, it gave the Academy some wiggle room to take some chances on the show for the new year in an attempt to bring in younger viewers while trying to keep some class in the show. The Academy hired Seth MacFarlane to host the Oscars, which was actually a huge breakthrough as MacFarlane was the first Oscar host whose work was not only primarily in animation, but who got his start in animation writing for Hanna-Barbera shows like Johnny Bravo, and then creating Family Guy, which is still on the air to this day. MacFarlane even poked fun at his more youthful appeal in this Oscar spot.
Hi, I'm Seth MacFarlane. Ask your kids, and I'll be hosting the Academy Awards. Ask your parents.
The Oscars, live Oscar Sunday, February 24th on ABC.
Aside from his animation background, MacFarlane was also a trained vocalist, so hosting the Oscars was actually an inspired choice. What's more, MacFarlane would also be an Oscar nominee himself that year for Best Song from his own directorial debut, Ted, which was one of the biggest box office hits of the year. So things were starting out strong for the Academy Awards as a show. In terms of the Best Animated Feature award, the films that were released this year were of much lesser quality than the previous, with a particularly weak international slate that resulted in some not too surprising snubs. Illumination tried to get into the race with Dr. Seuss's The Lorax, which received pretty decent reviews and respectable box office, but gained a bad reputation with the heavy marketing campaign around the film, in which the Lorax sold products to consumers in ways that betrayed the message of the Lorax Dr. Seuss was going for in the first place. Another notable snub was from Up on Poppy Hill from Studio Ghibli. While the script was co-written by Hayao Miyazaki, his son Goro Miyazaki directed the film. While the reviews for the movie were good, they weren't great, which was likely a key reason why the movie was overlooked by Oscar voters. Hotel Transylvania also failed to get into the race. Directed by animation legend Genndy Tarkovsky, the film starred Adam Sandler as Dracula, who is concerned about his daughter falling in love with a human. While the movie was enjoyed by audiences and was a huge moneymaker at the box office, chances are voters felt the material was too thin for an Oscar nomination. A movie that would have been really cool to see get an Oscar nomination would be A Liar's Autobiography, the untrue story of Monty Python's Graham Chapman. And yes, the movie is exactly what it sounds like on the surface. It is an exaggerated telling of one of the men behind Monty Python, and is told in the animation style similar to the popular British comedy. The only reason I can think of as to why this wasn't nominated was likely due to the fact that Monty Python is more popular with the British than American Academy of voters, and there may have been some vote splitting if this was considered more of a documentary than an animated feature film. Madagascar 3, Europe's Most Wanted, was DreamWorks' attempt to get into the race this year, but the zoo animals failed to get in a third time despite the fact that this was arguably the best installment of the trilogy. Although it had no shot of being nominated, I want to take a moment to mention that The Mystical Laws was submitted and shortlisted for Best Animated Feature. This is an animated movie from Happy Science, a notorious Japanese cult founded by the late Ryuho Okawa. Happy Science has not only made several animated movies trying to recruit people to their cult, but they can still be found in major cities handing out free tickets to their latest animated piece of propaganda. Again, no shot at being nominated, but this was too good of a nugget to not mention. Another film that would have made for an interesting nomination was The Painting, a film about an artist who mysteriously left one of his works unfinished. Animated in the style of famous paintings that you can find in museums all over the world, it was an ambitious artistic work that may have been too outside the box for the Academy voters. While it had no chance of being nominated, I think it would have been a hoot if the Academy had nominated The Rabbi's Cat, a film about a talking cat who wants a bar mitzvah, This was just a weird, strange movie that also happened to be really charming. Adding to the charm was the fact that this was actually released in 3D for some strange reason, and I would have loved to have seen what the reaction to a nomination would have looked like from the public. Rounding out the list of omissions, DreamWorks struck out again with Rise of the Guardians, a movie about holiday figures who team up to defeat an evil darkness. Despite being praised as one of the more original holiday movies made, for some reason the film did poorly at the box office and has failed to be remembered much beyond fan art that pairs protagonist Jack Frost with Elsa from Disney's Frozen. And finally, because I guess Disney was just convinced one of these Tinkerbell movies could get an Oscar nomination, Secret of the Wings was given a qualifying theatrical run to attempt to get a nomination. And this remains, to my knowledge, the only Disney Toons direct-to-DVD movie to be released primarily for the Blu-ray 3D format. So most of the snubs weren't exactly snubs, but what got nominated? Well, for starters, Pixar was back in the race with Brave, their first fairy tale that also doubled as their first movie to feature a female protagonist. Directed by Brenda Chapman and Mark Andrews, with a very big asterisk on the fact that we will be discussing later, the movie followed a teenage girl named Merida, who must break a curse that she accidentally places on her mother that turns her into a bear. While not beloved like many of their other movies, it was certainly a step up from Cars 2, and it did reasonably well with critics and audiences. Disney also entered the race with Frankenweenie, a strange stop-motion film from auteur Tim Burton. Shot in black and white with the exception of the credits, the film was a feature-length adaptation from a short film Burton directed for Disney in the 80s. That short, ironically, was supposed to be attached in front of a re-release of Disney's Pinocchio, but with a PG rating, it was considered too dark and scary for kids, compared to the non-scary G-rated film it was supposed to be attached to. And Disney fired Burton for wasting company resources. But irony of ironies, after Burton made Disney over $1 billion with Alice in Wonderland, he was given his choice of project for what he wanted to do next, and that resulted in him expanding Frankenweenie into a feature-length film. Upon release, the movie was a theatrical box office bomb, with it being too strange for most family members. Yet critics loved it and the artistry could not be denied. Laika, who made their huge splash with their debut film Coraline, was back in the race with Paranorman. Another horror film that focused on the supernatural, Paranorman was noted by critics and audiences for its dark atmosphere, creative 3D use, and ending that was hailed for being especially emotional. Paranorman was another certified hit for the so-called startup studio. Aardman Animation also managed to get into the race with The Pirates in an adventure with scientists, although the movie went under the title The Pirates Band of Misfits in America because apparently that was a more market-friendly title. Another box office bomb that would result in such a huge financial loss for the studio that they largely went back to making movies based on popular properties like Shaun the Sheep and Chicken Run, with the funding for most of those movies coming from Netflix. That may be worthy of its own video subject somewhere down the line, and if you'd like to see it, tell me in the comments section below. As for The Pirates, the reception was mixed, which may have resulted in the poor box office in the first place. Finally, Disney had a third horse in the race with Wreck-It Ralph. Promising to do for video games what Toy Story did for toys, Wreck-It Ralph was a huge financial success, with audiences and critics not only loving the video game referencing world that was created, but the genuine friendship story between Ralph and a bratty aspiring racer named Penelope. Disney themselves still had not won an Oscar for their own studio, and with two strong contenders, maybe this would be their year. The show opened with Seth MacFarlane throwing some Family Guy-inspired jokes at the audience's expense before doing a presentation where MacFarlane does a tasteless musical number about seeing various actresses' boobs in various movies.
In the movie that we saw your boobs. Meryl Streep, we saw your boobs in Silkwood. Naomi Watts in Mulholland Drive. Angelina Jolie, we saw your boobs in Gia. They made us feel excited and alive.
Now, that was set up for a much classier dance number with Charlize Theron to the music of The Way You Look Tonight, but so many people were offended that they sort of forgot that part. In fact, there were a lot of great musical numbers that took place in the opening that got overshadowed by the offensive boobs song. And that was a real shame, because I feel MacFarlane was one of the best song and dance hosts the awards ever had. He also did several hilarious skits with him interacting with the various nominees. Even though some of his jokes didn't exactly land, I would love to see him host again someday. But it was time to start giving out the awards, which went to Christoph Waltz in Django Unchained, which was an interesting choice considering Robert De Niro was pegged as the favorite to win his 3rd Academy Award. Unlike the previous year, the Academy didn't wait long to start handing out awards for animation, with Paul Rudd and Melissa McCarthy presenting the award, rather awkwardly I'd want to add, to Best Animated Short Film, which deservedly went to Disney's inspired black and white Paperman, which experimented with making 3D animation look more like 2D animation. Why make a 3D movie that looks like 2D when you could make 2D movies? I don't know, but it was a great short and thus a great win. They then went on to give the award for Best Animated Feature Film.
And the Oscar goes to Brave, Mark Andrews and Brenda Chapman.
And in a surprise move, Pixar was once again the champion of this award. But with so many great choices, why was Brave the big winner that night? Here are 6 reasons I believe Brave pulled ahead. Number 1. Pixar had the current champ advantage. While being the previous year's winner is normally a disadvantage, Pixar had a unique reigning champion advantage. They technically weren't nominated the previous year, but the year before that they had won, and had been winning for several years by this point. That meant that many voters were obviously going to make it a point to watch the latest adventure from them. Just because you watched it doesn't mean it's the best, but when it came time to watch the other movies, that revealed some other advantages the film had. Number 2, Brave was more accessible. In terms of being audience accessible, Brave was likely easier for the voters and their families to digest. Paranorman was very scary and Frankenweenie was at the least strange. Many older voters likely didn't get many of the video game references in Wreck-It Ralph, and the Pirates was honestly sort of just there. So if voters managed to watch all of the nominated movies, Brave was the easiest one to like. Number 3, Disney split vote. Despite the fact that Disney now owned Pixar, I'm sure it hurt a little to not have finally won this category for their own homegrown studio. The problem was that they were competing with themselves, and with 2 vastly different kinds of movies. Frankenweenie was an auteur project from Tim Burton, while Wreck-It Ralph was a more accessible film for younger people. If a voter wanted to vote for Disney, which would they choose? Chances are older voters would have sided with Frankenweenie, likely understanding the classic monster movie inspiration, while younger voters would have gravitated towards the more modern Wreck-It Ralph. But if that was the case, wouldn't Frankenweenie have an obvious advantage of the 2? Well, here's the thing about that. Tim Burton wasn't an Academy-friendly director. While Tim Burton is one of the few directors whose name in Hollywood sells tickets, he has always been a reluctant outsider in the business. His movies make money and leave cultural footprints, but virtually every one is a gamble, not easy to sell or even describe to a general audience. Studios only give him the benefit of the doubt because he made them money, but the average voter was never swayed by Edward Scissorhands, Beetlejuice, Batman, or even the more awards-friendly Big Fish. And while his movies got Oscar nominations and even received a few wins, with the exception of Martin Landau winning Best Supporting Actor for Ed Wood, Burton's films rarely won major awards. And even though it would have been logical to give him a Lifetime Achievement Award here, they were still giving it to a black and white stop-motion movie about a zombie dog that was too strange even for his longtime fans. Without the feeling that Burton had been snubbed one too many times for an Oscar, a narrative that Burton was owed an Academy Award never fully materialized, and most likely wouldn't without a more mainstream-friendly film. But if a Tim Burton is overdue for an Oscar narrative didn't form, another one certainly did, which brings us to reason number 5, making history with Brenda Chapman. A narrative that did form that the Academy voters could get behind was that of Brenda Chapman winning an Oscar. Brenda Chapman was an industry veteran. Aside from doing work on many classic Disney and Pixar movies going all the way back to Who Framed Roger Rabbit, she was a co-director on DreamWorks' first animated feature film, The Prince of Egypt, which won the Academy Award for Best Original Song. Thus far, no female had won the Oscar in Best Animated Feature, and that was a positive headline the Oscar voters could get behind, especially for a film that was not only Pixar's first fairy tale, but their first film to feature a female protagonist. That being said, there is a saying that the Oscars are all politics, and politics may have played the biggest role in this award at the end of the day. Number 6, behind-the-scenes drama with Brave's production. In what seems to be a reoccurring theme with these videos, there was behind-the-scenes drama with the making of Brave. While Brenda Chapman was credited as being a co-director of the film, the reality is that her title was more lip service than it was actually true. Brave started out as a movie called The Bear and the Bow, a title that makes much more sense in the context of the film, as it subtly translates to mother and daughter when you stop and think about it. The film was originally being solely written and directed by Chapman, who claimed the story was inspired by her own relationship with her daughter. The movie made it pretty far into production before executive producer John Lasseter removed her from the project and replaced her with Mark Andrews, someone who had far less experience directing movies, but did direct a couple of shorts for the company. According to Lasseter, the movie was simply not working and creative changes needed to be made. According to Chapman, she was removed because she refused to make changes Lasseter would tell her to make, suggesting he was acting more like a silent director than a producer. Without being in the room or corroborating testimony, it's hard to see who was right and who was wrong. But it should be noted that Pixar did remove Jan Pinkava from Ratatouille and gave it to Brad Bird, who turned it into one of the studio's best films, as well as its own Oscar-winning film. Likewise, decades prior, Disney removed Richard Purdom as the director for Beauty and the Beast, with producer Jeffrey Katzenberg demanding a complete redo of the film. That also resulted in one of Disney's greatest movies becoming the first animated film to be nominated for Best Picture. So removing directors is not always a bad thing, but when the final product is not great, it does make viewers wonder what could have been. In the case of Brave, the movie was not scrapped and rebuilt from the ground up, but simply reworked. So it was decided that Chapman, despite being removed from the project, would get to keep her co-director credit. I'm sure this was also done to save some face on what was, on the outside, not a very good look for the company. This decision is also what likely helped them win their Oscar, because with this story being common knowledge in Hollywood, this was a narrative voters could get behind. They could give an Oscar to a woman for the first time in this category. Chapman got her moment, gave a nice speech at the Oscars, and then resigned from Pixar. In the end, with no instant classic in the running, politics likely played a huge role in where the award went this time around. And while Brave is a fine film, it is one of those ones that many look back on with mixed feelings. But when you take the behind-the-scenes drama into account, it's pretty clear that Brave was never going to lose. It had a good story behind it, one that has largely been forgotten over time, but at the moment, it was strong. But another year over, and it was time to start looking towards the next year. Pixar would be sitting the next race out for only the second time in the awards history, and the competition would be fierce. An animation master would be releasing his supposed swan song, a critically acclaimed family film would capture audiences' hearts, a former villain would find love, and DreamWorks would be looking at how families evolved over time. But would Disney ever win their own Academy Award? Maybe they would, if they just learned to let it go. I'll see you all next time.
Hey, you made it to the end. Thank you so much for making it to the end. Just a few more things. First of all, the names that you see on the screen, these are our Patreon and YouTube member supporters, and I thank each and every one of them. Their support helps me make exclusive videos for Patreon and YouTube members, as well as keep the channel running, and of course is just of huge kindness to me. Also, don't forget to check out the iCritic-led podcast on Spotify, Apple, Google, Deezer, whatever podcasting service you listen to, it is there. We definitely want to see you there. And hey, there's also other videos that you can check out. So, check out these other channels, these other videos, especially that one. I think that's a really good one.